Swanee, God has smiled on the Gators, no question about it.
John Summerall continues to prove that he understands having the right attitude of being the Florida Gator football coach. Recently, he did basically a presentation, a show and tell, so to speak, with former Alabama running back, national champion, and star for the New England Patriots, Damian Harris, for CBS Sports, who showed him the workout facilities and the Florida program and the Florida campus and how he has translated from going from Tulane to Gainesville. And one of the things they talked about was rivals. You know, obviously Damian Harris understands what it's like to be a part of big rivalries at Alabama with Auburn and Tennessee and, LSU. And he asked John Summerall, as the Florida Gator coach, who are the rivals that you put and that you rank in order with Georgia, Florida State, Miami, and LSU? And John Summerall, simply put, FSU and Georgia, it's kind of hard to put one at two. You kind of put them at like 1 and 1A or 1A, 1B, or make them both co-number ones. And then you can mix up LSU and Miami because we don't play them that often. LSU used to be our, cross-division opponent, but that's no longer the case with the way that the scheduling format in the SEC has turned to. And in a way, he's kind of right about that. So I'm just here to talk about Florida rivalries throughout, Florida rivalries that I can articulate to the best of my knowledge, because obviously I'm 27. I don't have the extensive rivalry history that a lot of Gator fans have. But anyways, rivalries are obviously a big part of college football. In the Sunday League, meaning the NFL, you can have a good season even if you lose a couple of games to a divisional opponent. Ohio State won the national championship 2 years ago, but they look at that title as smudged because they lost to Michigan. To Ohio State fans, beating Michigan is more important than winning a national championship, as crazy as that sounds. That's how serious beating your rival is in the sport of college football. And Florida has quite the list of rivals throughout its almost century-long existence in the SEC, along with two other rivals within their own state. Excuse me, sorry about that. Let's start within the state. By the way, if you hear noise, it's because my neighbors are upstairs doing stuff in their apartment. I don't know what the hell they're doing. But anyways, outside west of Gainesville are the malignant Florida State Seminoles, a few hundred miles down south in Coral Gables are the Miami Hurricanes. Both of these schools for as long as they've been around, have hated the Gators because for a long time they were viewed as the other Florida schools because of their younger history compared to Florida. Florida has a century long in college football. Miami is about like somewhere between 60 to 70 years along, and Florida State is a little bit above 70. So both of these schools have had not the extensive rap sheet that Florida has in college football. So when people say college football in the Sunshine State, they always thought about the Gators before they thought about everything else. So it's kind of like Florida was looking at them as like their little brothers. Now, they both use that statewide perception as motivation fodder when they both became powerhouses in the 80s and 90s. Florida State with Bobby Bowden, he does have a brother named Tommy. He was a Clemson coach back in the day. Bobby Bowden for Florida State. We all know the success he had there. Miami going from, Howard Sternberger to, Dennis, I remember his name. It was like Dennis, look, Miami fans, if you know what I'm talking about, it's like Dennis something. I always brain fart on that last name. Dennis, Jimmy Johnson, Larry Coker, Butch Davis, Dennis Erickson. There you go. Dennis Erickson. And, with those coaches, they brought 5 national championships to the University of Miami. And obviously a lot of success in the Big East. So in Florida was still like trying to catch up to them success-wise and accolade-wise. In the 80s and 90s, because Florida was the last team of the Big Three to win the national championship and to win their conference. Florida didn't start getting to that level until the 90s. So it was a major accomplishment for both that they became national championship powerhouses before Florida. And when you listen to the fan bases of both previous and modern generations, they have a combined dislike and respect for each other in the Florida State Miami rivalry, but they have a pure disdain for the Gators, in which they have no respect for Florida, because Florida, I'm just gonna say it, stopped the time where all three teams would play each other every year, because they used the SEC schedule as leverage. You had to play the SEC along with playing Miami and Florida State. That was just going to make things more difficult for them. It was a cherry on top of their perception that UF had always a superior attitude compared to the rest of the state. And I'm a Florida fan, but I'm going to be honest. I always loved the idea of playing both Miami and Florida State every year. I don't know why, why, and you see more of this in college football, that schools are now canceling big games because they want to use their schedules as conference schedules as excuses, and saying, we already have a tough enough schedule as it is. We're not going to add more to that. Which, I can somewhat understand that, but to me, it's like you're really deteriorating the quality of the sport as years go by. But as we fans keep watching, it's not going to stop them, because the more we watch, the more they're just going to keep doing it, and the more they're going to raise ticket prices and a whole nother shebang that's another video in and of itself. But obviously, Florida did what they did and stopped themselves from playing both Miami and Florida State in the same year. So now it's only Florida State that gets to play Miami and Florida every single year, and they're the only ones that can actually say that they could win the state on a majority of the time, because they play those two teams every year, while Florida and Miami don't play each other as much. So that's the reason why the rivalries with Florida State and Miami is so big. Now you go to the SEC, Georgia. Nobody hates Georgia. Nobody hates Florida more than the Georgia Bulldog fans. Not even Florida State fans, I don't think, hate Florida as much as Georgia. They've been going at each other for over a year. Georgia has played Florida more than any other team in college football history, over 100 times, from 1908 till now. So over a quarter of a century and a quarter of playing each other, of going back and forth, whether it's in Jacksonville, whenever they had to play in Athens, or whenever they had to play in Gainesville. These two teams hate each other. They despise each other. Doesn't matter if it's football, basketball, or baseball. Georgia fans and Florida fans are always at odds. Now, while the Noles and Canes climbed to the top of the sport faster than UF did, and were there for a long time above the Gators, Georgia never really got the respect nationwide up until the Kirby Smart era, in my opinion. Today's era with Kirby Smart, you're like, yeah, Georgia is like, man, they're just recognized as just one of the elite powerhouses of college football. Even with Vince Dooley, when they won the championship in the 80s, he felt like they felt like another good program. And with Mark Richt, they were another good program. They weren't considered elite and in a atmosphere, in a galaxy of their own. And then while this was happening, you saw Georgia fans saw Florida with Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer go up to a level that was above majority, if not everyone else, in college football, when Urban Meyer won 2 titles in a 3-year span, and Tim Tebow had gotten a Heisman, and they went 13-1 in Tim Tebow's final year, and Steve Spurrier winning like 6 SEC titles, 5 or 6 SEC titles from 1990 to 2000, and getting a national championship and rubbing it in Georgia fans' face every time he would beat them, famously going for 50 points in Athens. That still sticks a craw in Georgia fans to this day, that not only did this guy beat Georgia a lot, but he hated the Bulldogs so much that he was going to rub it in their face at every opportunity. That hatred for Steve Spurrier resonates with Georgia fans to this day. And it's not just Georgia fans to this day, it's also the Tennessee Vols to this day, because Steve Spurrier did the same thing with them. And what made it worse was that Steve Spurrier grew up in the state of Tennessee. I don't remember what town it was, but he grew up in the state of Tennessee, left Tennessee to go to Florida, And when he became the head coach, like he did with Georgia, whenever he would beat them, he would stick it in their craw at every opportunity and rub salt into that wound. You know, calling Peyton Manning a 4-time Citrus Bowl MVP. You can't spell citrus without UT. And he made it clear to Tennessee that no matter how good you guys are, you're going to keep losing to me, and you're going to keep losing out on your chances of competing for a national championship or for an SEC title, no matter how good you are. And even when you do win the SEC or do win a national championship, I'm going to be that blemish on your record. It's competitive trauma that still burns in the ire of Knoxville to this day. Even with the Billy Napier era, as bad as it was, Tennessee fans still felt like that UF game was an obstacle they hadn't fully overcome until this past year when they broke the 20-year-long losing streak on the road in Gainesville this past year. As a terrible of a team Florida was, Tennessee fans got elated joy from getting that alligator off of their back, so to speak. So the Gator logo carries a lot of weight in recruiting, college football hype, the legacy of the SEC, and brand recognition within the state of Florida. Whether it's good, bad, positive, or negative, UF generates revenue and emotion both in and outside the fan base. And the Florida Gator brand brings opinions and it brings emotion out of people no matter which side they're on. And hearing John Summerall talk about that Florida State and Georgia are the two most important rivalries for the Gators, which is a fact because now with not getting Tennessee on an annual basis and not getting LSU on an annual basis and playing Miami every once in a blue moon, it's really come down to playing those two red teams in Tallahassee and in Athens for Florida fans to look forward to. And in my next video, I'm going to talk about, outside of Florida State and Georgia, which are the teams that Florida fans should be looking forward to seeing the Gators play this season.